They were too late. Even when they had her in their sights, they were too late. Princess Celestia's worst fears had come true. Nyx had become Nightmare Moon, and she had been the one to deliver her to those who would complete the transformation. While Princess Luna lingered in Ponyville to find out more about what had happened, Celestia went straight back to Canterlot. Upon arrival at the palace, she ordered her guards to be summoned. She didn't care if they needed to be roused from their beds or pulled from their spouses. Celestia needed to speak with them immediately, and she was making rare use of her royal rank to ensure it happened. The royal guard took the princess's orders, and within minutes, some of the most trusted members of the guards were racing to fetch the generals. This left Celestia with a moment to herself, and she spent it sitting on her throne. She needed some time to rest, some time to think. Princess Celestia began scrutinizing every recent memory she had of Spell Nexus. Surely there had to have been a clue. Surely there had to have been a sign of his treachery. Yet she could not remember a single instance of doubt. Spell Nexus betrayed her like Twilight Sparkle was betraying her. It didn't seem possible. There'd be no way. Yet that impossibility had become a reality. Spell Nexus had betrayed her. But before Princess Celestia could try to figure out why, she was drawn from her thoughts. The doors to the throne room opened, and Celestia couldn't help but look to see who had entered the room. She didn't think her generals could have arrived so quickly, and they hadn't. The pony that was now striding across the room, moving with purpose in each step, was her sister Luna. Celestia rose from the throne and walked to meet her. "Luna, I'm surprised you were able to return so quickly. Have you already finished interviewing the residents of Ponyville?" Luna did not reciprocate the warm welcome her sister offered. She instead glared at Celestia with hard eyes and a deep frown. "I delegated the task to a number of guards, because there was only one pony I want to talk to at the moment. You! What have you been hiding from me?" Celestia winced under the sharpness in Luna's tone. She quickly realized the conversation she and her sister were about to have wasn't going to be one of their better ones. Still, she remained her composure. "I don't know what you mean, sister." "Do not speak as if you are ignorant, Celestia," Luna snapped, her words dripping with anger. "You know something about what transpired in Ponyville, and of the strange mare that was seen there. Now I shall only ask once more. What have you been hiding from me?" Celestia turned away from her sister, unable to look her in the eyes as she began to recount the truth. "Just after the end of winter, a cult pony-napped my personal student, Twilight Sparkle, as part of an elaborate spell that would have been unthinkable. I'm happy to say that Twilight suffered nothing worse than a small cut on her leg and some rope burns. The spell in question, however, was designed to take the shreds left behind when you were saved by the elements of harmony and do what?" Luna pressed. "The spell would have taken those shreds, the lingering magic and echoes of the mare you used to be, and used them to give Nightmare Moon her own body." "Give Nightmare Moon her own body?" Luna echoed in disbelief, shaking her head firmly. "No, such a thing is not possible. I was Nightmare Moon. She cannot exist without me. She is what I became when I stole magic to make myself more powerful, and she was destroyed by the elements of harmony." Celestia shook her head. "Not destroyed, Luna. The elements of harmony are not a force of destruction. They could only separate you from the power and jealousy that once possessed you. They just peeled Nightmare Moon off you, and left you behind, like the tattered shreds of the discarded fruit peels." "But how could that be enough to reform Nightmare Moon?" Luna asked, her rage growing more intense as it was fueled by her confusion. "There is more to a mare, to a life, than power and emotions." "I do not claim to fully understand it," Celestia said. "But you know how magic works just as well as I do. Truly pure magic is a rare thing. Any magic from any pony can carry with it an echo of its owner. That is why some spells are stronger when driven by emotions like anger or happiness. It is why no two unicorns have the same magic. Magic and the soul are very closely tied. And because of this," Celestia continued, she shifted on her hooves, "I can only assume that an echo of the mare you used to be, an echo of Nightmare Moon, lingered in the shreds of the elements of harmony left behind. That was what the resurrection spell was meant to target. It was meant to distort, distill, and reform, and strengthen that echo, so it would be able to create the new body for Nightmare Moon. Luna shook her head firmly. No, that cannot have been enough. A body cannot be formed with such magic. Perhaps a mind, but that would not be enough. For Nightmare Moon to exist once more, she would need to possess her own... It doesn't matter anymore, Celestia interrupted, before she turned back to face Luna. The simple truth is that we must deal with this now that Nightmare Moon has returned, and we must stand against her. It does matter, Celestia, Luna snapped. She strode up to her sister and did her best to look her straight in the eye, despite the discrepancy in their heights. You say that all of this happened after winter, at the cusp of spring, and I must ask, why? Why am I only told this now? I did not want to burden you with this knowledge, Celestia answered with a caring tone. I was going to handle it, and you already had enough to deal with. I just felt... Luna grunted in rage and stomped away from her sister. I am not a filly to be false at anymore, Celestia. I do not need you to handle or deal with things for me, and I do not need you shielding me. I have learned much of modern Equestria, and I can speak the modern tongue and have retaken my royal duties. But Luna... Celestia tried to interrupt, but Luna stomped her hoof and forced Celestia back into silence. No! If the threat to Equestria is Nightmare Moon, then I should have been told. I was Nightmare Moon. Everything that mare did was my fault. If somehow some pony were to bring bring her back, then it's my fault it happened in the first place. Luna, stop it. You aren't responsible. Yes, I am, Luna bellowed. Her star-clouded mane was pulsing violently, like enraged waves on a storm-torn ocean. And even if it weren't, you still should have told me about this before it became such a threat. When were you going to tell me? Sister, please. When, Celestia? Luna pressed through grit teeth. Celestia opened her mouth to answer, but after a few moments she shut her mouth again. She wasn't able to say anything. She had no words, and from that silence Luna got her answer. You weren't going to tell me anything ever! You were hoping to keep this whole thing a secret. I was only trying to protect you, Celestia said, trying to defend herself. I was just trying to keep you from having to... Keep me from what? Keep me from taking responsibility for my past? Keep me from doing what I can for the sake of our kingdom, for our ponies? Nightmare Moon, either as what I was or what she is now, is my responsibility. You should have told me from the very beginning. Luna brought her hooves up and stomped them on the ground, in an attempt to vent some of the rage boiling inside her. If anything, the fact that she and I were once the same makes me more qualified to deal with the situation than you. At the very least, our roles have been reversed. I would have told you the truth. I know, Celestia admitted, and perhaps you are a better mare than me in that regard. But sister, you've had enough to deal with. You've been working yourself to the bone. You perform your duties at night and spend the rest of your waking hours trying to catch up with what all happened during your banishment. I wouldn't want to burden you further. But it was my burden to bear, Celestia. And we may have been able to avoid this entire situation if you had told me in the first place. Luna sucked in a deep breath and let out a raged, irritated sigh. You and I, however, cannot change the past nor deny the present. Nightmare Moon is now a mare of her own, and all we can do now is try and stop whatever schemes has been formed. We should send word to your student and her friends. I imagine we will need them to wield the elements of harmony once more. Celestia tensed and shifted her gaze away from Luna. We may not be able to rely on the elements of harmony. Luna furrowed her brows, tensing as there was still more she hadn't been told. Why not? You remember Twilight's cousin Nyx, the one who played Nightmare Moon during the children's play at the Spring Festival? Luna's eyebrows shifted, one becoming arched as her rage was taking a back seat to confusion. Of course. Why do you ask? That filly is not Twilight's cousin, nor is she related to Twilight by any familial connection. In fact, she's never been before her arrival in Ponyville, a few days after Twilight was rescued. Luna needed a moment to take in all the information. When she finally realized why Celestia was suddenly bringing up Nyx, her jaw dropped, and her eyes widened in disbelief. And that filly! You don't mean to tell me that? Yes. Celestia confirmed. The filly known as Nyx was the incomplete product of the original resurrection spell. This evening, the cult got their hooves on her. They were able to finish the spell they started. In truth, Nyx was always Nightmare Moon, but tonight the cult recalled her to the memories and powers she once possessed. But how did the cult get a hold of her? Luna asked. I spoke with the few ponies in Ponyville before departing. They said that the cult appeared and Nightmare Moon rose up from the center of the spell. No pony witnessed someone being taken to a ritual. Wouldn't Twilight have sent a letter if she feared Nyx was missing? No, she wouldn't have, Celestia admitted with a whisper. Why not? Celestia swallowed as she struggled to find the strength to admit her own mistake. Because I was the one who took Nyx. I was the one who believed her to be into the hooves of the cult. Luna was struck silent. She strode up beside her sister, expecting the punchline to which it could only be receiving as a cruel joke. Yet the expression on Celestia's face made it clear she was telling the truth. Luna couldn't help but stumble over her words in disbelief. Celestia, why? Why would you do that? For some time now, I had feared that Nyx was Nightmare Moon, Celestia confessed. At a school function, she was able to turn another pony into a tree, and displayed other magic well beyond a unicorn of her age. My dreams became tormented with images of her growing into the mare you used to be, and threatening every pony I cared about. I had to be sure she wasn't a threat, Celestia said, trying to defend her actions with words she didn't believe anymore. I had to know what we were dealing with, so I could act before Nyx became a danger to Equestria, to Twilight, or to you. So I spoke with Spell Nexus, and he promised a spell that would allow me to glimpse Nyx's soul. I was supposed to let me see for myself if she was in danger. Celestia growled and tossed her head. But of course, it would seem that the greatest threat came not from Nyx, but from the headmaster of my own school, Spell Nexus. How could he be involved in this? He was attacked at the beginning of last fall. His home was ransacked by the shreds of Nightmare Moon. The thieves beat him so badly that he had to be hospitalized for weeks. He showed no signs of treachery. He was once my student, Celestia bellowed, punctuating her words with a stomp. Why would he betray me? I do not know, Celestia, but there is far more pressing questions you are avoiding, Luna said, firmly, steering the conversation back to the matter at hoof. And the question I have asked, the one that you have not yet to answer, is why we cannot rely on the elements of harmony. Because I dare not ask a mother to strike down her own daughter, Celestia shouted, directing her anger with Nexus, not only at Luna, but also at herself. Not when I tore that daughter away. Mother? Daughter? Celestia, you do not mean to tell me. I do. I speak of Twilight and Nyx. Since the end of winter, my student has been caring for Nyx. From what Twilight told me, they began innocently enough. Like me, she feared that Nyx was Nightmare Moon, but she did not want to risk an innocent filly being unjustly banished to the moon. Thus, until she could be certain of Nyx's origins, Twilight kept it a secret. Yet over the months they spent together, Twilight Sparkle grew to be more than just a caretaker. Celestia struggled with her words. She came to care for Nyx like a daughter. She became her adoptive mother. Luna's face contorted into a horrified expression. And that is why we cannot rely on the elements of harmony? Because you stole Nyx away from Twilight? Celestia, it's one thing to keep this a secret from me, but what could have possessed you to... Do you realize that? I am fully aware of what I have done, Celestia bellowed, cutting off Luna's accusation. No, I do not think you are, Luna yelled back, raising her voice to match Celestia's. Do you think Twilight wouldn't have noticed if Nyx acted like the mare she used to be? Do you not think that she would have sent you a letter if she feared something was wrong? You once told me you trusted Twilight completely. Why would you doubt her now? I could not stand by and wait for Nightmare Moon to... Yes, you could have! Luna shouted back, her voice booming. If Nyx was going to become Nightmare Moon, there would have been warning signs. She wouldn't have just transformed overnight. Why did you act before there was an actual threat? You realize that your fault this happened, don't you? It is your fault, Nightmare Moon. I know! Celestia shouted, her composure breaking like a frail twig. Do you actually think for a moment that I wanted to do any of this? To cause my dear student such pain? I do not need to be told the heinous nature of my actions. But I could not wait for Nyx to become Nightmare Moon, Celestia said with a flare of her wings. I could not wait until the witch was standing at her doorstep with half of Equestria destroyed in her wake. I had to act preemptively. I had to be able to prepare, to get ready, so that if Nyx did change into Nightmare Moon, I would be ready to stop her before any pony got hurt. But why? Luna demanded. Why couldn't you wait? Why did you feel the need to act? Because the last time I waited, I lost you for 1,000 years, Celestia screamed. The fire of Luna's rage cooled under the weight of those words, and she couldn't look away from Celestia's crumbling in front of her like a sand castle being eroded by the ocean's waves. Celestia's wings fell limp, and she hung her head low, and her nose almost touched the floor. The tears began to stream down her eyes, forced out by the guilt, fear, and pain welling up inside of her. The last time I waited, Celestia replied quietly. The last time I decided to just wait and see if things would get better or worse was when you were first showing signs of your jealousy. I hoped that you would get through it. I thought that surely the ponies of Equestria would appreciate your knight as I did. I decided to wait, to let things work themselves out, and we both know how successful that was. So condemn me for what I've done, Luna. It is no less than what I deserve, Celestia said. She raised her head to meet Luna's gaze as tears continued to flow down her face. I stole a daughter from her mother because I feared the monster she would become, and in the process, I hurt my dearest student, Twilight. Even worse, because of my actions, my fears had become a reality. I, however, couldn't just sit by and wait. I couldn't give Nightmare Moon the chance to cast her dark shadow over Equestria once more. I couldn't let Twilight get hurt. Couldn't let her hurt you. I just couldn't stand by and hope that things would work out. Sister, Luna said. Her voice had a kind tone for the first time since the conversation had begun. Celestia, however, shied away from the comfort. She turned and walked slowly back toward her throne, doing her best to magically dry her ears. But I cannot think about that now. I must focus on the threat of Nightmare Moon. I must be ready to stand against her. Not I, sister. We, Luna corrected. She moved beside Celestia as a reassuring smile spread to her lips. Just as Nightmare Moon threatens me, she threatens you, and I am not going to let her hurt my elder sister. We will work together. We will find her, and if she won't listen to reason, we will do what is necessary to protect Equestria. Celestia smiled, nodded, and leaned into Luna. Thank you, sister. I do not think I could face this if it weren't for you beside me. That is what sisters are for. Nightmare Moon stood in an elegant hall, taking in its finely crafted beauty. Regal black marble columns flanked either side of the hall and rose to support a high arched ceiling. Rich purple curtains were draped from the columns. Torch holders glowed with white magical gems. The finest detail of the room, however, was the ceiling. It was encrusted with diamonds, using the precious gems as stars in a mural of the nighttime sky. One gem in particular looked about as big as Nightmare Moon's head, had been used to mimic the full moon in all its glory. Does it please you, my queen? Nexus asked with a respectful bow. It does, Nightmare Moon replied as she moved towards her new throne. It had a rich, night blue cushions and a frame made of black oak from the Dragon Country. Nightmare Moon couldn't help but admire its every detail as she settled into it. She fluttered her wings, and a contented smile formed as she looked across the room. It was her throne room, and it existed only to complement her own elegant beauty. You have done well, Spell Nexus, Nightmare Moon said. But I am curious. How did you manage to construct such a grand room in secrecy? It is not just this room, my queen, but a whole castle, Nexus replied. He rose from his bow and approached the throne. We found an unexpected ally in a clan of wild mutts known as the Diamond Dogs. They were more than a willing workforce once we promised to assist them in their search for precious gemstones. They dug out this entire cavern, and then assisted in the construction of the castle, Spellnexus continued. Once you have defeated Celestia and Luna, there are but a few dozen feet of rock separating this castle from the world above. Should you wish it, it would be trivial for you to raise the castle to the surface. It would be a grand proclamation of your new place as Equestria's ruler. Nightmare Moon's smile widened. She pictured her castle rising up and casting a harsh shadow across the land. Yes, it was a good thought, but one she would have to save for later. She could not raise the castle before defeating the royal sisters, and her curiosity was not yet sated. Tell me, why were the Diamond Dogs willing to put forth so much effort for the gemstones? I do not know, your majesty, Spellnexus answered. We never questioned why the Diamond Dogs wanted the gems. Perhaps they are like dragons and eat them, or perhaps they just liked to roll around in piles of gemstones as hogs roll in mud. In the end, does the reason really matter? The important thing was that they were strong, fast, and a willing workforce. Nightmare Moon's eyes flashed, her curiosity fed by Spellnexus's words. What did the Diamond Dogs do with the gemstones? Was Nexus right? Did they use them as a source of food, or did they, in fact, roll around in them? But wouldn't rolling around in gemstones hurt? Perhaps they had thick skin, or maybe they used the gemstones in another way. Perhaps they used them to make clothes, or used them as a source of currency. There were simply too many questions. The Nightmare Moon would have at least some of them answered. Spellnexus, I want you to see the leader of the Diamond Dogs, or whichever of them you brokered this deal with. Spellnexus looked up at Nightmare Moon with equal points concern and confusion. Forgive me, your highness, but part of our agreement with the Diamond Dogs was that, at the conclusion of the deal, they would migrate much further into the tunnels. We could not risk them interfering with our work. A frown formed on Nightmare Moon's lips. She hated it when she couldn't find the answer to her question. Her insatiable curiosity was her vice. It was why she loved to sit in Cheerilee's classroom every day when she was in school. Oh, how she found such joy in learning new things from the mulberry pony who... Nightmare Moon shut her eyes as she seized control of her mind before it could wander further. She could not think of those memories anymore. She was a queen, and Cheerilee was no longer her teacher. Cheerilee, like every pony else, was just a subject that needed to be brought into line, nothing more. I see, Nightmare Moon said as she turned her gaze back to Spellnexus. That is unfortunate. Still, if a Diamond Dog is found, have him brought to me. There are some questions I would like to have answered. As you wish, your majesty, Spellnexus said with another bow. Now, your majesty, please, allow me to show you the rest of your new castle. Nightmare Moon followed behind Nexus as he gave her a grand tour of the new home. The castle was beautiful, every bit as regal as the Canterlot Palace. Yet Nightmare Moon found herself questioning some of the decorations. Almost around every corner there was a mural or a statue depicting her. The quality alone would have been creepy, but there were also an unnerving constant theme about how she was being portrayed. While each mural was unique and statue was made up of dark, threatening visuals, one had her standing over the broken bodies of Celestia and Luna. Another had her casting a dark shadow over cowering ponies. They were all images of the future Equestria one could look forward to, and it left a strange feeling in the pit of Nightmare Moon's stomach. And here is the Royal Library, Nexus announced, drawing Nightmare Moon's attention away from the castle decorations as a pair of them entered the grand, bookcase-lined room. Please forgive the lack of books on the shelves. We built it to house the collection from the Canterlot Palace. Once you've taken the place as Equestria's true queen, we intend to move the collection there to here, should you wish to continue using this castle as your palace. Nightmare Moon nodded and let her gaze drift across the mostly empty shelves. The room was just as impressive as the rest of the castle. The towering bookshelves dominated the walls. The entire room was wrapped in a cool, dark color scheme. Yet, she found one aspect of the decor unappealing. There was a painting above the fireplace, which showed her standing over a charred, blackened ruins of Canterlot. Why did every painting, mural, and statue in this castle have to make her look like she was leading an army from Tartarus? Deciding she would leave that thought for another time, Nightmare Moon strolled around the room. She noticed a few Pegasus ponies fluttering about, putting away some books that had been gathered. Like all the other servants and guards she had seen, the Pegasi possessed something that drew her curiosity. "Why do they all have eyes like mine, Nexus?" Nightmare Moon asked. "It is your blessing, my queen," Nexus replied, swelling with pride. "As you may know, I was once the headmaster of Celestia's school for gifted unicorns. Upon your defeat, Celestia tasked me with studying your shredded remains. It was upon examining those shreds that I became enlightened to your wisdom and power. It was on that same day that my eyes turned the turquoise color you see now, and it became a sign of the Order. I bestowed the gift of these eyes upon every pony who wished to join the Children of Nightmare, when they pledged their service to you." Nightmare Moon nodded, turning her gaze back to the shelves as she perused a few books in the library's existing collection. She didn't recognize most of the titles, but one book did catch her eye. Coming to a stop, she used her magic and removed the book from the shelf. She gently cracked it open and flipped to the title page. Grand Tales of Equestria. "Your Majesty?" Nightmare Moon shook her head, snapping the book shut and replacing it on the shelf before looking to Spell Nexus. "My apologies. I can get caught up in my reading." "No apologies necessary, my queen. This is, after all, your library," Nexus replied. "Though there is still much of the castle left to see." "And here we have the guard barracks, where we train those who, to the Order, to defend the castle. The word of your return is spreading. Those I've sent out to recruit ponies to the castle are finally finding several eager to get on good terms with you. It would seem not all in Equestria are foolish enough to stand against you." Nightmare Moon didn't offer any reply as she watched the soldiers. They were standing in a line, each one taking turns attacking a set of training dummies under the watchful eye of their trainer. What drew Nightmare Moon's eye, however, were the training dummies themselves, which bore a striking resemblance to a certain set of mares. "Why do the training dummies look like Twilight Sparkle and her friends?" "Because it is they who are the greatest threat to you, my queen," Nexus explained. "It was they who defeated you, and we shall not let them have the opportunity to do so again. Should they get the idea in their heads to attempt to bring their unified power against you once more, they will be dealt with immediately." Nexus's words were punctuated by the guards attacking the training dummies that looked like Twilight Sparkle, and, with a single swift motion, beheaded it. The cotton-stuffed head bounced to the ground and rolled to Nightmare Moon's hooves. She stared at it, and then spoke with a single, firm tone. "No." "My queen?" "Should the bearers of the elements of harmony come to the castle, they are not to be harmed. The elements of harmony themselves are to be taken from them, for safekeeping. Then Twilight Sparkle is to be brought directly to me, and the rest of her friends are to be locked in the dungeon. I will then decide how I wish to punish them for standing against me." "Of course," Nexus replied with an approving, devilish smile. "I can fully understand your desire to punish them with your own hooves." Nightmare Moon turned her back on the training dummies and began to walk towards the door. "Good. And I want one of the Twilight Sparkle training dummies brought to my bedchamber. It has to be intact." "It will be there before the end of the tour," Spell Nexus assured, choosing not to question his queen's wishes. "The dining hall is, of course, spacious enough for any sort of event, should you ever be interested in holding a gala or other such frivolity," Nexus explained as the pair walked alongside the long, regal table that dominated the center of the dining room. It was made of a softly colored black oak, covered in a night blue tablecloth, and decorated with sterling silver candelabra, each holding 3 candles. "You should also be happy to know that we have already employed a royal chef who is eager to tickle your taste buds with some of his desserts," Nexus said happily. He motioned to a unicorn standing in the corner of the room. That unicorn quickly galloped forward and levitated a tray in front of Nightmare Moon. It was filled to the brim with chocolate cupcakes that had been expertly decorated with a thick swirl of purple and a single curl of white chocolate set delicately on top. "My queen, do the cupcakes displease you?" Spellnexus asked, noticing Nightmare Moon had once more fallen silent. "No," she replied, using magic to gently nudge the tray away. "I am just not hungry at the moment. Have some delivered to my chamber. I will taste them later." The chef nodded, galloping off to place the best of his dessert in the bedchamber. At the same time, Nexus showed Nightmare Moon to the kitchen to prove it was capable of handling any and all requests that she could make for the staff. The high spirits Nightmare Moon had been in when she'd first arrived in her castle had faded. Each room Spellnexus showed her dredged up unwanted memories and desires. She was no longer a weak, cowardly filly. She was no longer Nyx. Still, the months she had spent as a filly will not give her any peace. It was putting her on a foul mood. Despite the small headache chewing in the front of her brain, Nightmare Moon continued to follow Spellnexus. Thankfully, he had taken notice of her degrading mood, and had rushed through the tail end of the castle tour. They were just about to enter the last room of the tour. The moment the door to the chamber opened, a tingling sensation washed over Nightmare Moon. Magic, very powerful magic, was being performed within. There wasn't anything on the scale of the spell that had given her her own body, but the power of it was still respectable. "Spellnexus, what sort of sorcery is performed here?" Nightmare Moon asked. They walked into the room with her mood beginning to lift. "Research, my dear queen," Nexus replied with a smile, waving his hoof across the room. "Welcome to the research laboratory." Nightmare Moon eagerly looked across the lab. A number of desks and tables were set about the space. At each station a unicorn worked, twisting and bending magical energy. Some seemed to be just casting spells, while others were working with different baubles, trinkets, and equipment. Among the unicorns, a member of Pegasi and Earth Pony were assisting the researchers by taking notes and fetching materials. "Everything," Nightmare Moon quietly muttered with a faint smile. "Tell me about everything, about the work being done in here." Spellnexus gave an uneasy smile. He was glad that this room seemed to please his queen, but the curiosity she displayed was far more intense than he would have expected. Still, he nodded and quickly led her about the room. The first research station they approached was by far the largest. A series of lamps had been mounted on one end of the table. Half of them were shining with a brilliant, bright yellow light, while the others half had a pale, bluish-white glow. On the table itself, beneath the lamps, several different kinds of plants had been organized into neat rows. A single black barrier ran down the middle of the table, ensuring the plants under the yellow lights were separated from the plants under the blue lights. "What is this?" Nightmare Moon asked, looking between the two batches of plants. "Here, we are testing our latest batch of plants that can grow under eternal moonlight. We initially focused this research on agricultural plants such as grains, fruits, and vegetables. Those plants were finished some time ago, and we are ready to begin replanting equestrian fields, gardens, and orchards with the new plant breeds." "Then what are you currently developing?" Nightmare Moon asked, as she inspected the plants more closely. "More frivolous plants, such as flowers, grasses, and less productive species of trees," Nexus answered. "Some of the researchers made the point that Equestria would be far less picturesque without its many forests, plains, and flowered towns. I was inclined to agree with them, but I, of course, asked them to focus on flowers that complement your beautiful night, before proceeding on to other species." Nightmare Moon gave a satisfied nod and followed Nexus. Each station held some bit of magic meant to make the eternal night possible, which also meant she was getting abruptly acquainted with the natural effects of having no sunlight. The withering plants, the creeping cold, these were the things the children of Nightmare were working to solve. Yet her gut began to twist with guilt. During the summer sun celebration, she had plunged Equestria into eternal night, without considering any of these ramifications. What was she thinking back then? Why did she not realize the eternal night meant? Ponies would have seen her sky, but they would not have survived much longer after that. Nightmare Moon tried to remember why she hadn't considered the consequences of her actions. She found she could not. It was like a piece of her memory was missing, the memory surrounding her motivations. She knew she had those motivations. She knew what they were. Yet when she tried to remember them directly, what they felt like, why they had driven her, it was like she was grasping at nothing. My queen. Nightmare Moon shook her head, realizing she had zoned out once more. She turned to Spell Nexus, who had been looking at her curiously. Yes. I'm sorry, I was wondering if you had any questions for the research team. Nightmare Moon shook her head, turning towards the door. No, Nexus. I do not have any questions for them. They have been doing good work. I am pleased to see you all have endeavored to make Equestria a paradise of eternal night. Spell Nexus smiled before he and the whole research team bowed. You honor us with your words. Nightmare Moon huffed, fluttered her wings. Just make sure that once I've unseated Celestia and Luna from Equestria's throne, that you do not waste time transforming Equestria. I will not have this country become a frozen wasteland. I assure you, my queen, we will work with all haste to make Equestria a paradise worthy of your rule. Good, Nightmare Moon stated flatly. Now, I am tired and wish to rest. Then I shall escort you back to your private chambers without delay. Spell Nexus said eagerly before leading Nightmare Moon back into the hallway. And here are your private chambers, my queen, Nexus said, his horn opening a large, elegant door. You will find a pair of guards stationed outside at all hours, should you ever need any assistance. We only used the finest furniture, and I picked out the decorations myself. Does it please you? Yes, Nightmare Moon replied, though she had barely even looked at the room before stepping inside. I am honored to hear you say that, my queen. Now, you are undoubtedly tired. I will leave you to rest, and when you are ready to begin the campaign to seize Equestria, simply have one of the guards come find me. I shall, Nightmare Moon replied flatly. She turned and watched Nexus bow one final time before leaving. He pulled the door shut behind him, and then, and only then, the Nightmare Moon take in the atmosphere and furnishings of the room. Like the rest of the castle, it was decorated with a nighttime scheme, with dark blues and purples accenting by moons and stars. A perfectly circular bed sat in the center of the room. It was easily large enough to fit her comfortably, and it rested beneath the intricate fresco of the moon in the ceiling. With only mild interest, Nightmare Moon circled the room once and examined all the new furniture. There was a fireplace, a vanity mirror, a set of dressers, a few tables, a bookcase, a door to a small exterior balcony, and a writing desk. It was everything someone would need to enjoy a quiet night in their bedroom, and, as Nexus said, it was all the finest furniture. It, however, did little to improve Nightmare Moon's mood. She finished examining the rest of the room and turning her attention back to the bed. There, she rested on the soft-looking blankets. There were two items that she had requested for the day: a tray of carefully decorated cupcakes, and the training dummy that resembled Twilight Sparkle. Focusing on the desserts first, Nightmare Moon gently lifted and removed the paper from one of the cupcakes. She took a single gingerly bite and smiled at the flavor. It was good. It was moist, smooth, and it tasted so much like the cupcake's Pinkie Pie. The cupcake hit the door a moment later, thrown across the room by Nightmare Moon's magic. It bounced off the door, crumbling to pieces, and fell to the floor as some of its frosting clung to the points of impact. Nightmare Moon then took up the tray and slammed it, along with all the remaining cupcakes, against the door. She pressed down hard, using it to flatten each one of the frosted desserts for several seconds before she released her magic. The tray stuck to the door for a moment, but then fell free to reveal its result to Nightmare Moon's anger. The squished mess of cupcake crumbs and frosting, with the tray no longer holding it up, the gooey mess began to slide down to the door. It left a smear of frosting in its wake, and only came to a stop once it had reached the floor. The next thing to fall under Nightmare Moon's hateful gaze was a training dummy of Twilight Sparkle. She lifted it with her magical mane and held it in front of her. At first, her grip was careful and gentle, but then she began to squeeze tightly around the dummy's neck. Nightmare Moon stood there for several seconds, strangling the lifeless doll. Then she threw it to the ground and began stomping. Again and again she lifted up her body and brought her forehooves down on the Twilight dummy. Only when it was leaking cotton from a number of holes and a leg was about to fall off did Nightmare Moon cease her assault. As a result, to the doll, and the pony resembling it, Nightmare Moon hurled the dummy across the room. It bounced off the floor and ended up disappearing into a space between the writing desk, where Nightmare Moon chose to leave it. She stomped over to the balcony door, threw it open, and stepped outside to look at the exterior of her castle and the cavern it was contained in. She would be Equestria's queen. She would overthrow Celestia and Luna, and she would make Twilight Sparkle pay.